All right, welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got Graham Coffee on. We're going to chat a little UGA football. And let's start with this, Graham. I appreciate you for joining me. We were just talking before we got on air, and so I wanted to hit record real quick. The playoff scenario. UGA kind of on the outside looking in right now at 12, but obviously the group of 5 team is going to get a spot. Now, they can certainly play their way in, and it's not done. But just thoughts on where UGA is ranked, thoughts on the 12-teamer this year, thoughts on that from a big picture, and then we'll dive in a little more.
I mean, I think I've never been a fan of playoff expansion. I've never, felt like in most years that there are 12 teams that can compete for a national title. I mean, look, in 2021, I felt from the jump like you can just go ahead and fast forward to this Georgia-Alabama rematch in Indianapolis, right? And there's a lot of years like that. I've always joked like we should just decide on how many teams should be in the playoff at Thanksgiving every year, because I think we all kind of know, honestly, by the time we get to that point in the season, if there's an elite team or not. Now, in fairness, NIL portal has changed, I think, how some of this talent gets distributed. And we're sitting here, what's today? November 13th. And I think it's fair to say that there's not an elite team in college football. We've seen good performances or great performances from some of these programs. Nobody's really been that consistent juggernaut like we've had in most years past. And I think that's a product of teams not being able to hoard talent at the level they used to, right? If you're not starting, you're departing. And I think that we're seeing that show up all over the place. Now, for Georgia specifically, I was shocked last night. I was covering the Georgia basketball game last night when the rankings released, and when I saw 12, I was stunned. And I went back and read the transcript of the media call, and I was on the one after the first rankings release, and there is a lot of questions that I think need to be asked of this committee in terms of what is your charge? Because I think the point of having a committee is so we don't run into what we've done for 70, 80 years in college football, which is just rank teams by the loss column and nothing else, really. And strength of schedule has never mattered that much in our sport when it comes to the actual results of who gets chosen and who gets benefit of the doubt. So for Georgia, you're the first team to go on the road against 2 AP top 5 opponents since, I think, 96 Florida. You're playing the number 1 strength of schedule in the country by a pretty wide margin. And you look at some of these advanced metrics, your strength of record as UGA, even with the 2 losses, is 3rd best in the nation. You're sitting at 12. The Texas team that you physically beat the shit out of on their own field is sitting at 3, and they have 0 ranked wins. Penn State has 0 ranked wins. You got Notre Dame sitting up there, who does have some good wins, has better wins than I think Penn State or Texas does, but lost to Northern Illinois at home. So the way this is kind of shaking out is just it's what we've done forever in this sport, which is it pays to lose earlier in the season. And we're going to basically tier these teams by the loss column. And I think it's extremely unfair to a Georgia, and it's extremely unfair to, honestly, anyone in the SEC who was sold by Greg Sankey on this idea of let's expand the conference. It's not going to hurt you guys because we're going to have an expanded playoff in 12 teams. So adding a Texas to your schedule isn't going to hurt. If it's just, we can play all these big, sexy helmet games that are going to be big brand versus big brand, and at the end of the season, everyone will get in the tournament, and it'll be fine, and you guys can settle it on the field then. It's no, Greg, it's not working out that way right now because Georgia beat Texas by 15. They beat a Clemson team that I believe is number 20 in the latest rankings by 31 on a neutral field, and they're sitting there at 12 behind all these teams that didn't really challenge themselves in their conference or out of conference schedules yet. So I think for UGA, you have to be a little bit pissed off. And it seems very clear to me that this Tennessee game on Saturday is Georgia's season. You lose this game, you're not going to be in that field, in my opinion.
Are you looking to up your game in sports betting? Meet OddsJam, your ultimate ally in the world of data-driven wagering. With over 260 sportsbook under its belt, OddsJam is the go-to platform for savvy bettors. Here's how it works. OddsJam's arbitrage tool scans the market in real time, spotting differences in betting lines across various sportsbooks. This means you can lock in risk-free profits by betting on both sides of the market. But that's not all. OddsJam also provides positive EV calculators to optimize your bets and a handy bet tracker to monitor your profits. By using OddsJam, you're not just betting smarter, you're betting responsibly for long-term profitability. And here's the kicker. They offer a 7-day free trial. Ready to give it a shot? Use code CFA, that's College Football Addiction, for a 35% discount on your first payment, either monthly or yearly. Secure your bets with confidence and make informed decisions with OddsJam. Yeah, and Florida State fans certainly did their fair share of complaining last year. But I thought Georgia should have been complaining as much, if not more, than Florida State. Like Georgia's, if you're going with the best teams, which is a very subjective word, Georgia would have been favored against any of against Michigan, head to head on a neutral field. Georgia would have been favored. Like, the books came out and said that. That's not like my speculation or just that is what would have happened. And so I think it's still fairly similar to that. Like, maybe Oregon's slightly favored, maybe Ohio State's slightly favored, but then I think Georgia's probably favored against everyone else in the country. And I'm not even sold on the Ohio State one, but we'll say it's close. We'll say it's within 2 points. Who cares? So, if you're going with best or, it's this weird dichotomy of best, most deserving, recency bias is a big thing. If Georgia was to beat Clemson this weekend, even a 20th ranked Clemson team that has 2 losses, if they were to beat them by 30 again, well, I guess 28, like they did to open the year, that would mean so much more than it did in week 1. And again, same thing here. You lose to Northern Illinois in November as opposed to September, and it devalues. We always said this, or I always said that it would devalue the regular season. It would very much bring recency bias into the picture, and you're able to lose really bad games or win really big games. Like, again, if Florida State beats LSU in November as opposed to, on Labor Day night, it's very much a different story. And so winning games later is more important, which, again, if teams are playing better later, I understand that idea. But it really does. It calls into question the whole thing. And like I said, there's no transparency. The committee basically disproves last week's point every new week that happens. They do something that kind of doesn't line up or jive with what they said last week. And so there's no transparency. I ultimately think that, none of the early ratings matter or rankings. No. And it's just what they want to do on that final Sunday, and they'll justify it however they want.
Absolutely. And, I went back and looked last night at the original transcript from the teleconference that Ward Manuel and the chairman of the committee did after the first rankings release, because I was like, let me just jog my memory here a little bit, right? And you do very much have these, incongruent statements of, we felt Penn State, they deserve to be in this spot because they have a good loss to Ohio State. They beat an Illinois team, which they put up 21 points on Illinois, who's not a bad football team, but they're 6-3. And then they reference the West Virginia win on the road in week 1, and they reference the USC win, who USC's below 500. I think going to overtime against them might be a ding on your resume. And it's just like they're going to twist these facts, I think, to fit whatever kind of narrative they want. And I think that there's a certain level where it's like, Penn State's a 1-loss Big Ten team, so they must be a top 5 team, right? And I think there's just that logic there that is illogical, honestly. And for Georgia, you talked about last year, I always thought that was kind of shambolic in the sense of, because Alabama lost to Texas in week 2, there's this very selective kind of application of the transitive property where we're going to say that gives Texas a leg up over Georgia because you have to put them over. But now we're in a spot where, hey, Georgia beat Texas, right? This is a 2-loss versus 1-loss. We're not talking 4 losses versus 1 loss here. These teams are close enough to where you can't sit here and tell me Texas is the third best team and Georgia's the 12th best team if Georgia beat them by 15 on the road, right? Like they have to be closer together. Or you can tell me Georgia's the 12th best team. They're not that good. That's fine. If that's what you believe, then Texas can't be third. They got to be sixth or seventh or eighth. They got to be down the pecking order a little bit because they got physically beat up by Georgia. So one of these things is not like the other. And at the end of the day, you're right. They do contradict themselves every week on the conference calls. And it's a little bit pathetic, honestly, to kind of see at this point how some of this is playing out, because I think what is the function of the committee if not to judge some of this stuff? And they're judging it poorly. And I would think with, this kind of being sold to the public is you've got ex-coaches in here, you've got people that understand football. It's like, no, you don't, man. You don't. And, even I take huge issue with Penn State being anywhere in the top 5 of this thing because they haven't beaten anybody, and they got spotted a 10-point lead at home, couldn't finish it because that's what they always do. And now you're in a spot where, okay, like Indiana's undefeated. Why are they behind Penn State? Because last night on the teleconference, you guys said, well, Georgia's got 2 losses, so they automatically go kind of behind everyone with 1 loss. Why does that logic not apply to Indiana and BYU, who you have behind Penn State, who has 1 loss, right? So it's this kind of selective bullshit, quite frankly, and I think people are fed up with it. I tweeted some of this last night. I just said, Texas 0 ranked wins, Penn State 0 ranked wins, Indiana 0 ranked wins. You've got Georgia 15-point win at number 3 Texas, and the win over Clemson we just referenced. Someone's going to have to show me the math here. Right now, that tweet has 19,000 likes. So I don't think that you and I are alone in not understanding this, and I think college football fans are a little fed up.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And because there are so many criteria, right? Like when it was the computers, it was, hey, we're going to plug all these numbers in. We're going to come out with a final result. You may not like it. You may like it, whatever. But it's an objective way of figuring it out. And when you have 13 different criteria that you're looking at as the committee, you literally can, it's the greatest way to argue ever. When you have 13 different criteria and you say like, well, for this one, we considered this. And for this matchup, we considered this. And for this matchup, we considered this. And then, so you can literally just rank the teams how you want and then apply the criteria that you like or that favors your argument. It'd be like, if you were an attorney, that'd be the best way you could ever argue anything. You'd say like, well, this made sense here and this made sense here. And they give you this BS about, hey, we don't take other polls or other rankings. Well, of course you do, because that's how you formulate your first couple
poll
weeks
is
of it.
Pretty much a copy of the AP poll.
Yes, it's almost identical. And how else are you ranking those wins early in the year when Alabama beats a Georgia? Well, that was a top 5 matchup, so of course you're thinking of that in that frame of reference. Or if you're not using the polls, you're using the brands at the very least, and so, which are always aligned with the polls. I mean, let's not kid ourselves on that either. There's a reason that Boise State and BYU and folks are ranked behind. So, yeah, it's a sham, and it always will be. There will never be, in my opinion, any kind of transparency. It'll take Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti like changing things with the next go around if they ever wanted to change. And I don't know that it will. It might just be like, hey, well, if y'all are going to do this, we're going to formulate our own thing, right? We're going to do
that's what I said last night as well, is like, if this committee keeps ranking teams by the loss column, especially in this kind of expanded conference era where, you add Oregon to the Big Ten, you add Washington to the Big Ten, you add USC, like you bring Texas and Oklahoma into Georgia, into the SEC, like you are going to make yourselves redundant, and you're going to basically cause your own collapse. And I think that is maybe, the kind of joyful side of this, the cynical side of watching this is like, these people are so stupid that they don't realize that they keep this up in a couple of years, nobody's going to be there to pay that caviar catering bill down in Frisco or wherever the hell they're hanging out in these 5-star hotels having these conversations. Like, televise this thing, televise the conversations, record them, let people go back and look at it. Like, you better get some transparency, or if you don't want to be transparent, which nobody in college athletics does, I think both of us know that, then get it right. You know, you can get it right, nobody will be on your ass, and you can continue living the high life every year.
Yeah. We'll talk about this Tennessee matchup in our next segment. But first, where can people follow you, Graham? Where can they find your work?
You can check me out on Twitter at Graham Coffee DC, and then DawgsCentral.com, Dawgs Central YouTube, podcast feeds. I think we do a very thorough and good job covering University of Georgia athletics. If you're a UGA fan looking for inside intel and that kind of stuff, come and find us.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.